I hope you all enjoyed your lunch. I don't know about you, but I thought it was absolutely magnificent. It was very filling, very tasty, so thank you. So the after lunch session, everyone's nice and full and probably ready for a bit of a snooze, and I can guarantee you'll be awake for every minute of this, and I'm sure it will be extremely informative. The session is Raising Young People That Cope, or Raising Adolescents That Cope. Lyn Worsley is a clinical psychologist with a background in nursing, youth work, early childhood and tertiary education teaching. Lyn has experience working in prisons, hospitals and schools and with young people on the streets. Her passion for working with young people and their families is evident both in her educational choices and her work experience. Delegates, please welcome Lyn Worsley to the stage.
Thank you for having me. It's really lovely to come from one side of Australia to the other and touch base with people who are doing the real work. I often find the differences coming from Sydney to Perth is quite evident in just the people that are really doing the work, or the people that are talking about it, and I really enjoy that. What I'm going to do for you today is to go through some of the work that I'm passionate about. The passionate part of working with young people is looking at what it is that makes them cope when they've gone through adversity. As has already been said, I've worked with kids on the streets, I've worked with kids in the prisons and a number of different settings, and I'm constantly in awe as to what it is that makes young people cope when they've gone through adversity. And oftentimes finding that it's the adversity, those kids that have gone through the adversity seem to be the ones that are more resilient. And why is that so? And a number of researchers have actually gone into that. My area of work has primarily focused on finding looking at those who have been more resilient and looking at how it is that they're strong and how they've coped and what it is we can learn from them so we can transfer it. Today's session, I'm going to take you through another area that actually links to that, and that is with the area of moral development and social development. Because what we understand is that those young people who seem to survive early on in life, manage to get through their adolescence and then do very well in adulthood, are those that have the social skills to navigate and negotiate. And there is a researcher in Canada who says resilience is the ability to socially navigate and negotiate. And if you hold on to that, then that means what we need to do is work on our relationship skills with our young people. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of a journey, get you to help me with it, because there's nothing worse than after lunch everyone falling asleep. So here we go. We'll focus particularly on the middle years, because during the middle years, from ages 9 up to 14, there is a massive amount of changes. They've got a number of things that they have to negotiate. And the characteristics of those middle years is that they have to actually negotiate their cognitive skills, they have to change a whole lot of learning styles. They also have to change how they think about things socially. They start to move from being the top of the tree at the end of primary school to being the bottom of the pits in high school. And that is actually really helpful for their social development, because there's nothing worse than kids who think that they're still the top of the tree and they get it right up to their adulthood and they still stay there. And what we understand with social development and moral development, it is that it's completely about our interactions. So if you don't have interactions that help you to change and challenge yourself socially, you will stay at the early stages of development. And most of us know people like that. Physically, well, we don't need to go into all the physical development during adolescence, but it's a huge change for them. So they're having to negotiate an awful lot during the middle years from ages 9 to 14. And the transitional challenges that come with that. The transitional challenges are how do we go from, primary to high school? How do we go between friends? How do we go from different sporting prowess to other times where I'm not so good at things, taking up new activities, and also understanding where I fit into the community at large. And there's also developmental challenges. The developmental challenges of just being, changing my identity. Now I want you to think about a scale from 0 to 10, from one side of this room to the other, from 0 over here to 10 over there, okay? So 0 meaning we've just got a situation where we've really got no self-awareness, you're not dependent, dependent completely on your parents and your teachers to have ideas and to dress and to organise and direct them to do everything. So just imagine you've got a child at that stage, at 0, and they're not able to do anything for themselves. It's pretty much when they're born, yeah? At 10, the student's got high expectations of themselves, they're able to be self-disciplined, they've got a good self-esteem, and they've got a knowledge of how to use the resources and connections around them, and to face challenges in the coming years. So think about that as a number 10. Where do you think the Year 5 student is at? What number would you say they are at? Just call out. 4? 5? It's like an auction. 7? So 5, 4, 5, 13. So we've sort of really got 4 to 7, so around about the middle, yeah? Okay, let's be happy with that. Where's the Year 9 student? 2. Where would we like to see the Year 9 student? 7, 9. We want to see a level of independence, don't we? We want them to dress themselves. We'd like them to be 10. So we've got a bit of a change here from, say, 4 up to, 9 to be able to negotiate in those short spans of years. What have we got to learn in that time? What have they got to be able to negotiate to go from 4 up to 9? What have they got to learn? How to cope with the unexpected, conflict, responsibilities, respect, how to cope with failure. Yep, all of those ones. Compassion. Okay, let's see if I've got some of those on my list. I think a lot of those that you just called out were social skills. Interestingly, the social skills that we need are twofold. What we understand with kids who are resilient is that they have the ability to navigate the world around them socially, but they also have the ability to navigate with the right people. So you could have some people around you and ask them to help, and they're not the helpful people. They don't put you first. They're not the right people. So the navigation and negotiation and social skills that are involved in getting through those years is working out who are the right people to negotiate with. So a child can be born into a world with all of the social, a really good temperament, with a nice sociable temperament. But they have an environment around them of people who hurt them and harm them and abuse them. That child doesn't build up resilience. A child may also be born into the world where they've got a whole lot of developmental delays, yet they're born into a world with an environment that has got an enriched experiences around them, with people who navigate and negotiate well for them. That child's resilient. So what we have is that social skills don't just involve the child learning how to behave and do the right thing. Social skills also involve us, how we relate to them and respond to them in a way that helps them to develop. The other thing is that young people need to learn is social scanning. Now, they're really good at scanning on the internet. They're really good at doing things with the social network sites. They can scan that really well. But can you bump into... Do they scan when they're walking down the street? and you bump into them because they're too busy listening to something in their headphones and they're looking at their iPhones? Are they able to have a peripheral vision that enables them to see what's going on around them so they can look out when someone's needing some help? Do they stand up when someone comes who's elderly onto the bus because they've noticed them? And that's social scanning. Social scanning also involves being able to know who are the right people to talk to, who are the people that are helpful, who are the people that are going to be doing the right thing. So that means that they scan their social environment and look for cues that are safety. And social scanning, I believe, is going to be something we will find in the brain. And my belief is that will change over time. This next generation will have a change in the neurons that are developed for social scanning. We already know we get a change in peripheral vision depending on what we're exposed to. Now, social scanning involves a number of different cognitions. So we need to be careful about social scanning. If we want our children to be able to socially scan, we need to teach them and give them those experiences. And sometimes that involves activities that don't necessarily use the Facebook sites. The other thing they need is a self-efficacy. And self-efficacy is that, yes, I can do something. I can change my circumstances. Children who don't develop that wait for other people to tell them what to do or always wanting to have praise. A lot of adults still are in that stage. They need to be praised for what they're doing, otherwise they don't do it. Self-efficacy is that sense of, I've done a good job and I'm feeling good about myself. No one needs to reward me for that. They also need some self-discipline. They need to be able to work out what their limits are. And you know what they do? They practice at home. They practice making mistakes with moving beyond their limits and having tantrums and arguments and working out their limits. As parents, what we are to do is to be able to reflect to them what their emotional outbursts do to other people so that becomes a navigation and negotiation response. The interaction that we need to do as parents is reflective and enabling them to change and monitor their emotions. They need to develop a level of optimism. If they have optimism, they can see the world in a way that is able to look at the negative in the now, the things that aren't working right now, but able to work out how they might be able to change them for a much more positive future. So optimism is not positive thinking. Optimism is particularly about how you navigate the world now so that you can create a change in your interaction right now that will make more positive in the future. They also need to be able to regulate their emotions. Similar to how I've said in self-discipline, if they can regulate their emotions, they're able to stay on task with things. They need to have a knowledge of themselves. They need to know where their strengths are and they need to know their learning styles. This is an enormous amount of learning. Have you noticed how much they have to go through in those middle years? Oftentimes we find that the middle years are neglected. There's a whole lot of stuff done for early years, a whole lot of stuff done for post-school or high school and getting them through so that they've got, university entrance. But we forget about the middle years, the bit between 9-year-olds and 14-year-olds, and they're quite foundational for future development. What I'd like to go through now is looking at moral reasoning. Now, moral reasoning is different to a lot of these others that I've talked about. It underlies how a child or an adolescent sets up their value system. And this means when you've got a child who has got a value system or a moral reasoning skills that help them in the world, you'll find that they will find meaning in the difficulties and the adversities that they face. It's inevitable that children will face adversities in their future. We should not protect them, we should prepare them for it. And we need to be able to give them skills that helps them to find meaning in the life that they're doing, in the difficulties that they're doing, so they can learn through the negatives that they're going through now to help to create a more positive future. Do you hear? This is the theme. Cope with the negatives that you're going through now so that you can create a more positive future. Moral reasoning helps us to understand where a child's development is going and what the stages of that is. And one of the key areas of the middle years is to develop a sense of compassion. For children who don't develop this, they may go on to, adults who haven't gone through their moral reasoning skills or development have what you call narcissistic personality disorder. And they don't have the ability to see things from another's perspective. They see other people as a tool for themselves, not as someone who's going to be able to help them or be part of their lives that they're interacting with. They're more like, this person's there for me, rather than this person is a person. So when we're looking at moral reasoning, we're looking at the ability to see things from another's perspective. Okay, so how do we develop that? Now, Kohlberg said that moral reasoning occurs in the context of relationships that have deep connections and purpose. So you can't just put kids through a gym or give them some computer program to help them with this. You can't just give them dilemmas that they solve in class. The actual way of developing moral reasoning is through relationships, deep relationships. There's 3 stages of moral reasoning. And again, remember the line I just put on the stage before, 1 down this end, 0 down that end, and 10 up that end. And in the middle is around about 5. So we've got down this end, pre-conventional stage of moral reasoning. I want you just to hold on to this, and I'm going to show you the 3 stages, and then I'm going to give you some examples, and you're going to call out where you think they are in their moral reasoning stages. So in the pre-conventional stage of moral reasoning, we have the child who has the perspective, or the person who has the perspective of only their own and one other person perhaps. So this is most of us, all of us actually, would have been born at this point and have the sense that, you know, we're born now, hello everyone, the world has just started because I'm here. And that's how kids are. They're very egocentric, everything is about them because they only have their own perspective. Their best friend is who sits next to them in class or who gets driven to school with them or sits next to them on the bus. Their best friend is a person who is there right next to them. Not necessarily about whether they have the same interests or values or whatever. But they have an ownership of the other people. So their motivation behind any decisions that they make is just to satisfy their own needs and to avoid punishment. So they could be really good because they just don't want to get into trouble. This could be a wonderful passive child who's just avoiding doing anything wrong because they just don't want to get into trouble. So that's their motives. Or they might do something so everyone will notice so they can look good. Are we starting to notice that there's some adults in our lives so we know like this? The standards that they have are the rules. So this is you're in or you're out. Everything's black and white. Somebody's got sent out of class, so they must be naughty. So from now on, they're a naughty person. That sort of very black and white thinking. They don't have any grey areas in their life. And the criteria for looking at the world is fairness and consequences. It's cause and effect. Everything is so black and white, cause and effect, fairness and consequences, which means when we think about things that have happened, we look for a blame and shame approach. So we blame people and we'll shame them because they did something wrong. There isn't that sense of understanding that other people are people. It's more that they are there outside of me and so they haven't got the same feelings as me. Now, a child has this, and I actually think it's quite interesting to watch a baby negotiate this for the egocentrism of a child, where they just look at something for the first time. And that's why I really love looking at this picture. She looks like she's discovered that leaf and the reflection as though it's the first time. So that's our pre-conventional stage of moral reasoning. The next stage is a little bit more challenging and very challenging for parents. It's a conventional stage. The perspective is the group. This is right in the middle. This is where we start to fit in with the group and we wear our undies right down our bums with a Calvin Klein pants hanging at the top and we think we're cool. We wear our bags and our backpacks in exactly the same way. We have the same walk when we walk. We do things that fit in with everybody else. Now that means what we've started to do is a little bit of social scanning. So that's really good. Yeah, it is. It's really good because we've started to work out what everybody else is doing and we work out how to fit in with that. We start to notice that there are some norms then that we need to conform to. And in that conforming, we start to notice that we are not the kingpin. We are not the top of the tree and everyone isn't all about me. In fact, other people are in my group and they're competing because they think it's all about them. And we're starting to work out how we fit into the world. So being in a group of peers means that you're exposed to a whole lot of people who are navigating the egocentric state into more of a groupie state. The motives behind the decision of someone in a conventional stage of moral development is that they want the approval of other people and they want to uphold the group laws. Now that might mean that they'll break rules, real rules, school rules, because the group rules were much more important. And that might mean that they'll do things to please the group and not please their parents. Now that's progress. As strange as it feels, that's progress. And sometimes we need to be aware of this change in their development, which means that they're starting to fit in with the group and they're choosing things to fit in with the group as opposed to sticking to the rules and doing the right thing all the time. It's progress. The standards are the group rules and the common laws, and the criteria for the world is other people's expectations and the compliance with others. Now we know also adults that are stuck in this level as well, and a lot of times I believe we oscillate. We might have got to this stage and then we go back to the earlier stage, or we might move further into the next stage. But the conventional level of moral reasoning is vitally important because you can't jump from the pre-conventional to post-conventional without going through this. So this is a really necessary stage of development. And it is in the context of peers that we go through this stage. The post-conventional stage of moral development is right up the end here. You guys are on it. You're on it. It's where the Mother Teresas live. Just put your hand up there, Paul. At that end, we have the perspective of another person or another group of people when we've actually not had the experience of them. So we can feel and have compassion for them. This is when you have moments where you watch the television screen and you see a starving child and you're moved to tears. That's a moment when you're in that post-conventional stage of moral development. You don't know what it's like to starve. You don't know what it's like to be in that environment, yet you're compassionate about that. That's the post-conventional. The next one is your motives behind your decisions at that stage are to ensure human rights for all people. So it's not just about rights for you and not just rights for the people that are in your group, but for all people, and that would mean looking at equity for everybody. The standards are your personal principles. So the standards that you have are about what you think is right, and you're not going to waver from that, even if the group tells you differently. The criteria for looking at the world is justice and universal rules or values. Now, how often do we want our adolescents to go from stage 1 to stage 3 in the drop of a hat? How often do we expect them to go out with their friends and not bow at peer group pressure and stand up and you know, have a stand different to them? All the time. Yet we don't realise that in order for them to navigate that middle part, that is, to get to that end part, they need to navigate the middle part. And what is also really evident is that you can look like you're as compassionate as anything and lovely to everybody, but you could still be doing it for the first stages of development. I'll give you some examples. Think about two girls, Jenny and Jane. And Jenny and Jane are in year 7. They're about to start. You have year 7 in primary school here, don't you? They're about to start high school. And here they are in year 7. They're about to start high school and they've decided to be best friends forever because they're going to the same high school. And while they're there, they have the secret. They go and they find a brother's, I think Jenny's got an older brother and he's got some cigarettes in his room. So they go and find some cigarettes and they take one each and they go and smoke it. It's their secret. They do it together and they have a little thing that they just are going to be best friends forever and look after each other. What stage of moral development are they at this point? Pre? 1 or 2? 1, 2. We've got some people going between. Perhaps we're starting to move into that 2. Yeah? Okay. But it's 1. Sort of 1. Still just one other friend. Let's just say they get through to go to high school and it comes to the end of year 8. At this stage, Jenny and Jane are looking pretty hot. Okay, so Jenny's brother is starting to have some interest. And he says, how about you come to a party? You come to a party with us and everyone, would like to meet you and stuff. And if you come and I'll give you either an ecstasy tablet or you can smoke some of my marijuana and I'll show you how to do that. And that will be really exciting for you. What if Jane says, that's it, he's breaking the rules, I'm not going because I might get into trouble and I'll never be allowed to go out again? What stage of development would she be at? 1. Okay, so she's down here at 1 because she's made it because she doesn't want to get into trouble and she wants to avoid the consequences. What if she says, drugs are bad but I don't want to lose my best friend and I will never get invited to parties again and I really want to be part of the party scene and so on, but drugs are bad and I'm a bit scared of them and something bad might happen, so I'm going to pretend to take the drugs, but I'm not going to draw back and I'm just not going to swallow it. I'll spit it out if I have to have it. What stage of development is she at there? Okay, so she's moved into 2. What's her motive? She wants to fit in. Okay. What if Jane says, right, that's it. I've got to fit in with the group. I'm going to do everything that happens with everybody else and I'll take the drugs and it'll be really good and I'll have a story to tell everybody else the next day. What stage? She's right in the middle. So she's progressed, is that right? What happens if she says, that's it, it is really bad because he shouldn't be giving 13-year-olds tablets or drugs of any sort, and I'm a bit worried that Jenny is always dragged into her brother's stuff and I don't know what to do, but I know I'm going to have to tell somebody and that means I'm going to lose my best friend and I probably won't be very popular at school after that. But I have to tell someone. What stage of development is she at? 3. Now, is that realistic? Year 8? Okay, so we've got a bit of work to do, haven't we? We've got a bit of work about how to navigate this middle stage and what to do with that. There isn't any answer to that. There isn't any answer as to how you do that exactly. But the key is that we find ways of actually helping them to work through it and have the dilemma. The worst thing we can do is to prevent them from having the dilemma. We can't protect them from the dilemma. Well, we can. If we protect them, we don't give them the experience, and therefore they have every reason to stay in that first stage of development. I've got some more examples here, so if I've got to open my iPad just to challenge you a bit more. Let's have a look at Justin. He's 13. Okay, Justin. He's in a small group of friends. They play computer games over the net quite often, and they've all got into the games in a really big way. Justin's won a few prizes recently, and he won an international game. This meant he had to stay up all night to compete, and consequently he was sleepy all day, and he was unable to contribute to schoolwork. His parents were unaware of his late-night escapades, and his friends were pleased with him, and he gained a fair bit of recognition from this regarding his win. They talked often on Facebook, and they've got code names, introducing each other to new friends via the social network site. Justin's parents noticed he was always on the computer, and they didn't know anything about the games that he had. They thought he was doing schoolwork. He didn't ring his friends much, or they have them over to their house, or so his parents didn't even know any of his friends' names or their parents. They were worried about him becoming isolated. One day, Justin's mother found him in his room, sobbing uncontrollably. She finally got from him that his friends had all ditched him because he'd started to lose the games. They chose another guy instead. He said this always happens to him, that people only liked him if he won. And Justin then said that he wanted his parents to sponsor him to join a competition next month so he could win his friends back. Okay, before you tell me what we're going to do with Justin, what's working for him? Winning? The computer? Talking on Facebook? Yeah? What else? His parents not knowing what he's doing? Perhaps? He's got a bit of charm with his mum, so he's able to tell her. So that's actually helpful. He's able to talk to her about it. He's got quite good. If you think of him winning an international game, he's actually quite skilled. So remember we talked about efficacy as being something really important for young people? He's got that, and he's got that through the computer. What stage of development is he at, morally? 2. So he's caught in that middle because he's trying to navigate his friends. What would make him go backwards? Could we do as parents to make Justin go backwards in his moral development? Take the computer away. Sorry? Make him get a job. What would help him in his progress? What would help him to move towards or to navigate this middle section a little bit better? What would be helpful that we could do? Okay, introduce him to another group of friends who might be playing similar games. That's right. Okay, that would be brilliant. We're not going to take his computer game away now. We're actually going to build on it. And this is what we're calling strength-based learning. So when you find a child's strength, you find the area of the development that they're doing well with, and we're trying to move him morally in that direction. And I'm assuming all of us want him to grow in that direction. Then what we need to do is to help him to navigate using the areas that he's got, that he gets a sense of efficacy from. We couldn't send him off to a football club at this point. It's not going to work. So we're going to find where it's working and build on that. Okay, let's have a look at the next one. We've got Grace. Grace is 11. She's in year 6. She seems to have a lot of friends at school, and she's got lots of friends over to her house after school and on the weekends. She likes to be the centre of attention at home, so having friends over is a relief for her parents, so it keeps her occupied. Lately, there seems to be a change in the group of friends, and her parents notice that there's one girl who's not invited to the gatherings lately. Grace often makes jokes about her to her friends, and they all laugh. Grace also has a best friend called Jodie, and together they tell each other stories about the kids they don't like, particularly those who aren't pretty or popular. Grace and Jodie appear to be the popular girls at school, and they always have a following around them in the playground. They're often chosen for public speaking or presenting at assemblies. One day, Grace comes home from school crying and saying that Jodie and her had a fight. Jodie had called her names and had talked about her behind her back. Grace was upset and wanted to retaliate. She asked her mum to ring Jodie's mum and get her into trouble. What's working for Grace? Before we do something with her, what's working for Grace? Friends? Peers? Putting the tears on? Yes. She's a bit of a drama queen. But that itself, being a drama queen, is a social skill. She knows how to, that's a navigation and negotiation skill. She knows how to get the people to do what she wants, and that's a very clever skill. So we're not going to knock it, it's helpful. What else is it working for her? The attention she gets? She's been very successful, so she's got an efficacy from her social skills. Yep. Okay, what stage of moral development is she at? End of one? Why do we say two? She's got a group. Why do we say one? Okay, now this is a really good example of how you oscillate between the two. And that's about growth. And you know, if you can do something really awful to a child in this middle stage, socially, they will go back to that beginning stage and they won't move. So we've really got to be very careful here. We've got every reason that she could be punished or she could be ostracised and put down, even though at the moment she's doing what we would call bullying behaviour. But at the moment, if we treat her in a way that is negative and pushing her in a way and giving her a sort of a traumatic response and helping her to retaliate, we can push her back big time and help her to stay there. What would make her regress? What would we do to push her back there? Call Jodie's mum, get her into trouble. What else would make her regress? Yeah, so we walk up to the school and say, that's it, she's being bullied. What are you going to do about it? Fix it up? Get rid of that other girls? What else? You're telling her she should get over it. So this is a real dilemma for her. It's really important that she experiences it in a way that we don't dismiss it, but at the same time we don't take it away from her by trying fixing it up for her. What would help her progress? What would help her move in her moral development towards maybe having some compassion? Telling her that the first... Yes, that there will be others as well. It'll keep coming. So how are we going to manage this? Okay, what else could we do to help her to move forward? Recognise the original child. How will we do that? Yes. Now, if we can manage to get that link for her, now for those who didn't hear, somehow getting her to actually remember what it was like for the child that's been ostracised and left out in the past, and having some link so that her experience as being left out now is similar to the girl that was left out before. So there's a sense of, oh my goodness, is that what it feels like? Oh, that's awful. Now that becomes a discussion that's a beautiful discussion that we can have as parents when they're sobbing uncontrollably. It's like, oh gee, this must have what Sam felt last month when everyone left her out. What did she do about it? Okay, so we've got it all sorted, we've fixed them up. How do we enhance moral development? So here's some tips. Here's some tips to help you to navigate and negotiate a little bit better for them. Always ask about the motives. Think of the Jenny and the Jane story. If they had just been punished straight up for going to a party and perhaps taking the tablets or not taking the tablets, we would not have known the motives behind that. If we don't ask about the motives, we can't help them to understand the dilemmas that they're going through. Oftentimes children are punished far too readily when they've actually made a moral dilemma. And I looked after a little boy who was age 8, who I would have said had the stage 3 stage of moral development. Beautiful boy. And yet he'd been expelled from school. And what had happened is that he'd gone to this new school, this third school that he'd gone to, and people hadn't recognised that he had this advanced level of moral development. And he was standing, when I asked him, why are you in trouble now? What have you done? And he said, well, when I was at this new school, everyone lines up in the playground to go after recess, go into school after recess. And there's this one group 2 lines away from me, and there was a boy in that group, and he was really fat. And all the other kids were poking his fat and laughing at how his fat was wobbling. And he said, so I got so upset about that, so I threw a brick at them. Unfortunately, this kid was a really good shot. And so consequently, the child had to be taken to hospital, there was concussion, you know, all the rest, and of course he was up for suspension, if not expulsion. But when we actually looked at that and asked him about his motives, it was an aha moment. This kid is thinking way beyond his own self here. He's in this stage 3 of development. And we actually looked at his life. He had a disabled sister that he used to have to look after on a regular basis. He had compassion because of his experiences that he'd had already in his only 8 years. Once that was recognised and he wasn't punished for it, they were able, the school, fantastic group of teachers, managed to organise for him to be put into situations where he could use those compassionate skills to teach others. And one of the wonderful things was he came back to me when he was 12 with his school captain's badge on, which was lovely. But if we don't start recognising that moral development shift happens independent of a child's physical development or cognitive development, as you could see from that 8-year-old, he didn't have the skills to manage his moral development shift. He didn't have the skills that were social enough to know how to deal with that. So sometimes we have these kids who are out of sync. But our jobs as parents and teachers is to always have interactions that move them in that direction. Always help them to move in that direction. And sometimes that involves us doing things and saying things that you can't believe we're saying.
Also understanding that their emotionally moral development was at that stage 3, and his response is at the 1.
That's right. And that's completely out of sync. So the moral development is at stage 3 and his skills at stage 1. Very different. The other thing is that we should encourage mateship with integrity. In Australia, we have mateship. We value it highly. And to actually encourage mateship with integrity means that you encourage kids to stick to each other and be loyal. And sometimes that means looking out for each other and maybe taking the fall for someone. And that should be rewarded or at least noted. And not necessarily rewarded, probably just noted or discussed. Integrity also means, and I must admit I put this on my kids as they went through adolescence, it might mean that you look out for your mates when you're going out drinking. You be the person who counts the drinks that your mates are having to make sure that they're okay. You be the person that makes sure that you're there supporting them when they're maybe not doing the right thing, so that you're able to help them, so that they don't go off on their own and end up injured. That's mateship with integrity. That might mean that you miss out on having fun at the party, or you have to go off and take someone to the bathroom all the time. While that sounds like a difficult thing to ask, that is actually what we would call mateship with integrity. Integrity is doing the things that you don't necessarily think are popular, but you know are right. The next one is to be responsible for friends, caring rather than copying. Looking out for them to care, helping them, asking the kids, when someone is upset, asking Grace about, I wonder why Jodie's feeling like that. I wonder what's happening in Jodie's life to make her feel like she's not happy with you. So that sense of care and compassion for another rather than copying her behaviour by retaliating. Demonstrate care rather than competition. I don't know if anyone realises here, but compassion and competition are two ends of the scale. When you compete with another, you can't have compassion for them. When you have compassion for another, you won't compete as readily. So they are very different loggerheads. And sometimes having that dilemma and talking that through to them is really helpful. Teach social scanning. When you go to a party, when you go out to a football game, when you go anywhere, sit with your child and just wonder. Look at other people and say, I wonder what's going on in their lives. I wonder why they're not sitting close together. I wonder why that little boy's left out. I wonder what's happened to them. That's like social scanning. That's involving the child to look at other things and think up what might be happening and making some sort of, not judgments, but looking that other people are in this world and that they also have lives that have got difficulties so that they can have compassion. Resilience. And I think I've only got a few more minutes, is that right? Or I keep going? I'm allowed to go over. Good. Great. Okay, let's have a little look at resilience. This is the area of work that I'm most passionate about. If we look at resilience, we start to see that there is a number of different definitions. You can bungee jump through the pitfalls of life, which basically means you cope and you bounce back. I think we've come a long way from that. I don't think we just accept that as the only definition anymore. This is my definition, which is the process of continual development. So all of us here are still developing resilience. We're continual development of personal competence. We're learning competence while at the same time we're negotiating the available resources around us at the same time as going through adversity. Can you be resilient without adversity? Is it possible? I'm not going to answer the question because I actually don't know. I don't know if my children, my own children, who have got lots in their lives, are really resilient. I don't know if they're just lucky. I don't know because they haven't been through famine and torture and violence. They haven't had the difficulties in their life that other people have had, and I don't know if they're resilient. I hope they are. Resilience skills involve social navigation and negotiation skills, which is what I said earlier. The work that I've been working on is the resilience donut. And the resilience donut, which is the subject of my 2 books now, the resilience donut for children, The Secret of Strong Kids, and the resilience donut, The Secret of Strong Adults. It focuses on a resilience building tool that promotes the engagement of existing strong contexts in a person's life. So it actually looks at what you've got going for you, where your strengths are and where your connections are that are working. And it's used for children and adolescents and adults, and it's based on this model. And currently we've got teachers and parents and counsellors that are using the model across Australia. You have a key group here in WA called Clan WA who are also running a lot of programs based on the resilience donut. The resilience donut looks like this. It's the shape of a donut. The internal characteristics are I have, I am, and I can. And that's based on our resourcefulness, so the things that we have around us to help us to cope, our self-esteem, like I am, this is who I am, and our self-efficacy, like I talked before, what we can do to change our circumstances. And these internal characteristics interact with 7 different contexts. And 3 of the factors, only 3 of these factors are needed to build resilience. So the 7 different contexts, as you can see there, each of those have tensions, but none of us have all 7. Each of us would have something that's a difficult area, but we only need 3. So you think about the 3-legged stool. So a child, in order to develop resilience, needs to have 3 areas of strength in their life to be able to manage to sit on the stool. If you've got 4, that's great, but 3 is all you need. If you have less than 3, the child will fall over and won't develop I have, I am, and I can. They will develop I haven't, I'm not, and I can't. In order to build resilience, we need to have positive, intentional relationships that give us insight, constructive feedback, and change and adaptation to resilience, to enable us to build resilience. Let's look at in years 5 and 6. We've got a little girl here who has possibly got 3 main factors that are building her resilience. Generally, and this is a very general thing I'm saying here, and not every child would have this level of resilience or these factors that are strong for them. The parent factor is usually fairly dominant for a child about that age. The family factor is something that the child's really more engaged with, and the school. And so during that time in primary school, you have a lot more parent engagement, and you often have the families that are all, the children, the siblings are involved at the school as well. And generally, if a child's going to the state school, they're in a neighbourhood as well, where there's other kids going to that same school. But that's their 3-legged stool. If you can do 3 things, or do something with those 3 things all at once, what you can end up is like a flow-on effect. Let's say we've got this little girl who's starting to move into year 6 and 7, and as she develops, she starts to be able to have some friends that she's had for a number of years. And she also starts to play netball or one of the sports on the weekend, or soccer, and she has some friends that come along to that. And she develops the skills that she feels like, oh, I can do this, and she's feeling good about that. She then has a community around her where she's known in the local shops. She can go down to the shops by herself. She might be able to go to various friends' places and have sleepovers. And she develops a community of other people that she can go to talk to. She hasn't got a job yet, so the money factor comes in fairly late. Let's have a look at her when she's in year 9. Let's see what the dominant factors are there in year 9. We have the skill factor, which she might be really good at football. She might be really good at netball. She might be good at dance. That might be something that she's really got a skill, really gets that efficacy about. She might have some really good friends that she does that with, and she meets them at school. What's happened to the parents in the family? They don't exist. But think about it. What are we trying to negotiate during these years? Independence, moral development. Where are we going to get that mostly? We're going to get that from our friends. So friends are really quite important during this time. So it's really important that we do things with those. And as parents, what I would suggest you do is get to know your kids' friends and their parents, and do some things that, together. It may be organise year 7 and year 8 functions where the parents all get together and exchange phone numbers and understand what each other are up to, so that you've actually got a network of people who know your child and you know their children. What happens is that after a while she'll start to get a job, and that will put a bit of pressure on the others, and she might have friends that go to that job. She might also then have develop her community around the job and the school if it's a local part-time job. The parent factor and the family factor, notice that they come in last, because during that stage, that's how the development goes. If we want to raise connected and resilient students, we need to make sure, as children, we need to make sure that they're supported in a community. And if we want to change the trajectories for young people from being disconnected to connected, from resilient and supported, to be resilient and supported, we need to actually change the attitudes of the families and the communities and schools around them. We can't send programs in where we just work on them and their skills. What we need to do is send programs in that builds us. Conferences like this. Conferences where we network together, but maybe networks where we have the opportunity to get to know each other's communities and families and children and friends around each of them, so that they're connected and that the children then are able to grow in that context. If we are better at social skills, they will be better at social skills. If we are able to talk to them in a way that builds their optimism and their moral development, they will do that. But if we sit back and expect the schools to do it on their own, it won't happen. We have to connect. We have to combine our strengths to thrive. And if we want to build the resilience of our young people, we have to make sure that we do that. Evidence shows that if we work with the strong factors and the strong context in a child's life, we end up with a flow-on effect into the weaker areas of their lives. So rather than doing a donut, looking at the donut's strengths and finding the weak areas to build, we don't do that. We look at the donut's strengths and we find the 3 areas that are strong, and we do something with just those. And we end up with a flow-on effect that builds that child's resilience. So as I said just then, I'm a little bit ahead of my own slides. If we want a child to be resilient, find the strong areas of support and connect them to thrive. We've got a number of programs, and I'm just on my last couple of slides now, number of programs that we're running in Sydney, and I'm training people over here. A couple of our donut trainers are in WA and are starting to run programs here as well called Connect 3, where we work with how to build the child's 3 areas of strengths, but at the same time getting them to do a kindness project so that they develop their level of their moral development and move towards doing something with compassion, but in their context of strengths. So this is our Connect 3 program, and this is us doing our program with marshmallows and spaghetti. It's a bit of a messy activity. The other one is called Linked Up, and this is the one we use for the older children. Older adolescents, where they do again another project and help looking at their moral development. Particularly helpful for kids who've got difficulties with their social scanning and difficulties with how to connect socially. So we do something so that they've got a project that they can do that with. We've worked with resilience camps at Hurstville Boys at a school in Sydney, and what we did there, and this is quite a disadvantaged school, we got the kids to find out what their areas of strength were, and they did something on this resilience camp using their 3 areas of strength, and sometimes that involved getting dad or mum along because that's where their strengths were. We did some work with a school in Geelong where we looked at the kids' overall resilience, and we put in some resilience camps there, building the skills with their parents, their community and their peers so that they actually all connected around an area of strength. But what we noticed here in the research is that those young kids who had signs of depression and anxiety were the ones that made the most change in that whole school program. And they they maintained their changes over a 12-month period, which was quite exciting. And that's the end. Thank you. I'm not a very good salesperson, but I always forget to tell people, but I have got some books at the back in the foyer on the Resilience Donut, The Secret of Strong Kids, and I've bought 5 books of the Resilience Donut, The Secret of Strong Adults, because it was released on Monday, so I just thought maybe I'd bring it along. And thank you for having me.
Thanks very much.